Hey everybody, let's talk about insecurities and how they manifest themselves in our everyday lives. If this is your first time watching, thank you. My name is Daniel, the psychology student. I upload once a week on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, really wherever you hear your podcasts. Today we're going to talk about insecurities and how we can see different insecurities in people all across the world. Now you can see this in different ages, you can see this in different stages in a person's life. I've seen this talking to students. I've even seen this while I'm watching YouTube when I'm listening to certain podcasters or influencers or YouTubers. Here's an interesting principle, and I want you to think about this. When someone is lacking in something, whether it be love, whether it be confidence, whether it be attention, whether it be strength, that individual will likely try to, if you will, peacock themselves into selling the idea that they are the most confident person in the world when they are not. I'll give you an example. You know how there's that classic idea where if you go to a dog park and you hear a bunch of dogs barking, bark, 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 just like no tomorrow, there's a good chance that it's the smaller dogs that are doing the barking. The big German Shepherd might be silent as he's passing through. Again, not all the time, I'm generalizing, but it's usually the little dogs. Why? They feel like they have to make up for something. They feel like they have to prove how tough and how rough they are to get that same respect as a big dog might. Right? Because a big dog doesn't have to say anything. Its body does the talking for it. Whereas a little dog, it has to get vocal, it has to get loud. In my life, I've been in different circumstances where, whether it be parties, whether it be on campus, at school, where you hear individuals talk about themselves in a certain manner. Now, I was going to say food for thought. Here's something to just keep in your mind whenever you meet individuals, and I'm sure you've met them at your work, at school, wherever. Whenever someone is trying to convince you of something about themselves, take it with a grain of salt. If I meet you and I keep telling you I'm a very funny person, I'm the funniest person you'll ever meet, I'm an extremely funny person, if I'm telling you rather than showing you, that should strike a couple of alarm bells, right? If I have to tell you how much money I make every year, if I have to tell you how many views I get every week, if it comes off like I'm trying to convince you of something all the time, folks, what am I trying to tell you? Why do I need to convince you so bad? Let's say I am as funny as I say I am. Let's say I am as rich as I say I am. I get as many views as I say I do. Why do I need to try to convince you? What happens when I convince you that I am who I am? Let's talk about identity for a second. How do you know you're a good person? How? What is the idea of a good person? And you might think, well, Daniel, a good person is someone who helps out, they're kind, they give back necessarily when they don't profit themselves, they do it for the sake of doing it. Excuse me. That's the kind of archetype of a kind person, and I strive to meet that. Fair enough. But would you agree that a large part of your identity is what people tell you you are? The problem with people who are surrounded in a negative environment when you want to start talking about adolescence and having poor self-esteem, getting bullied, depression, is if someone tells you you're a loser every day, is if you don't have any friends, if you don't have a great social support system, you start to believe some of those negative thoughts and they impact the way that you interact with your surroundings, right? And you find individuals, and you're going to come amongst individuals in your life who have certain ideals, but deep, deep down internally, they're missing something. There's something that they need. They need validation from other people to give them the confidence and the relief to go, okay, I am what I think I am. If you meet someone who's hysterical, who's a very good storyteller, and they're very funny to be around, they're never going to utter the words, I'm a very funny person. You just listen to them and you come to that conclusion yourself. Right? Anybody can say, I'm a funny person or I'm a kind person. But to have a room full of people vouch for you on your behalf and say, this dude's funny, that's something not many people can do. So when we look at insecurity and when we look at this idea of, look, you're not a very tough person. Whenever we're out at a party, you raise your voice when speaking to women or when speaking to guys who are physically less intimidating than you are. And you have this persona of a loud, rough, tough guy. And yet, when you're talking to individuals who physically are your size, they're your height, they're your strength, you don't act the same way. It's like overdoing it in one department. You don't spend a lot of money going out regularly. But when you're around these groups of people, you have to talk about where you parked your fancy car and how much you spent for your fancy watch and what fancy vacation you just came back from. There's some sort of validation that you were hoping to get from someone else. Let's talk about lonely guys for a second. Unfortunately, the story of a guy fighting for a girl's attention for an extremely long period of time is way too common. Generally goes like this, and I'm speaking from a heteronormative perspective, meaning a man and a woman, because this is the area that, first of all, I have anecdotal experience, and also the most amount of research, if you look at it, is biased. It primarily looks at men and women, as opposed to men and men, women and women, or transgender individuals, or, all the other genders. So, if we look at it from a heteronormative perspective, when you have an individual who constantly seeks something from a girl, even though she's not interested, whether it be her attention, whether it be her look, whether it's all he wants is just for her to sit beside him, it might just be her presence. At one point, you might sit back and go, well, look, he likes her. He has feelings for her. He's attracted to her. End of story. Well, maybe not entirely. Maybe if we look deeper, and this is not a statement to cover every single person who's interested in someone, all right? But in certain contexts, you have individuals who are missing something in their lives. Maybe they don't have a great relationship with their mother. Maybe they're a little lonelier than they'd like to be. And what you see these individuals do is they relentlessly pursue someone to get that attention, to get that validation, or to make them feel good. I don't think I'm a good person. That girl is extremely attractive. Look, let's take this one step further. I'm a loser, and I'm going to die alone. I've got nothing good going for me. That girl looks incredible. She would never date a loser. If I can get her to be interested in me, well, then what does that say about me? Maybe I'm not who I thought I was in the best way possible. Whenever you think of a successful man in a club or something, and this is from like the beginning of time, like we're talking about caveman days, it was one guy surrounded by a bunch of women. Why? What was symbolically, what does that mean? You might think of words like successful and rich, or was that guy Dan Bilzerian? I've only heard of his name. I don't actually know what he does. But always I see him in YouTube thumbnails and he's surrounded by women. Why? Because it's nice to be around all those women. Okay, but how does it look externally when you see one guy surrounded? Well, the first thought to other men is, wow, that must be nice. Huh. I wonder what's so special about you to have all those women lingering around you. Are you super charismatic? Are you great at flirting? Do you have lots of money? Is it a combination of the three? So you kind of get this awe factor. You kind of get people looking in an envious-like way. And for people who have felt insecure in some part of their lives, getting to shove their success and their happiness and good things that happen to them down other people's throats makes you really feel good. At least for a moment. Why? Because eventually, those guys who are looking at you surrounded by all those girls, they'll leave. They'll go home. They'll go off and do their own thing. And now you're surrounded by women, but no one else is looking at you. And deep, deep down, you're thinking, am I doing this for me? Or am I doing this because other people are watching? So the question becomes, when there's an individual who goes after something, or who tries to convince you of something, it can be extremely revealing of what they're feeling inside, internally. Why do you strive so hard? Why are you so ambitious and so work-oriented? And maybe you find out that this individual's father wasn't in the picture, and it was him, his mom, and his sister. And at a very young age, he became the man of the house, and he's had this idea of being the provider from a 12-year-old to now a 22-year-old to now a 32-year-old. And that's his idea. Maybe the reason he makes so much money is because even though he's got way, way more than he'll ever need, he's still in that mindset of, I need to overcompensate. Because dad's not here, because mom's got her disability, so she can't work. I gotta take care of him. There's that old saying that says, don't forget what brought you to the dance. And oftentimes what happens with individuals psychologically is we learn certain habits, and we learn certain defense mechanisms which are designed to keep us safe over a long period of time. And what we see happen is something that is very effective and useful at one point is no longer necessary in the later part of our lives. When this kid was 14, 15, 16, maybe he needed to be really driven and had to have a huge work ethic in order to go to high school and hold down a job, and maybe a second job. But now that this individual's in his 30s, and his mom is well taken care of, and his sister, she's working and she's got her own job, he doesn't necessarily have to be a provider to that extent. Maybe it's less so. But once we get used to something, once we get used to making up for something, it can be very hard to deprogram ourselves and go, look, the reason why I'm in such a good position right now is because of all the working I've had to do. Now I have to forget what brought me to the dance. I am where I am because of my work ethic. Now, my current wife is upset with me because I don't spend enough time with her. She goes, why are you gone all the time? I go, I'm gone so we can have this awesome house. Do you enjoy that wine that you're sipping? It's pretty nice. Did you like that vacation we just went on? Yeah, that was possible because I'm gone all the time at work. That's how that works. And look, there's this really interesting idea. If you want to look at masculinity as a whole and how kind of it's changed across time, if we just look at it as an example of how can I provide? What can I do? How can I give back? Forget masculinity, if you're a man or a woman in a relationship, what can you add? What can you contribute to the relationship? And if you find that you can't contribute in one way, it's very logical to go around and try to contribute another way. If you're an individual who maybe isn't the best looking, maybe you try to compensate by being very work oriented and you make a lot of money. Vice versa, maybe you're a person who doesn't make a lot of money, but instead you're really big into fitness, you're really big into the gym, you're a tall 6'3" guy, big muscles, and you've got that going for you. See, insecurities are interesting because they ignite our motivation to go do something, to go get something. It doesn't feel good to feel insecure. Insecurity is synonymous with incompetent, with feeling uncomfortable, with borderline shame. I do not feel proud when I tell you that I'm a 30-year-old man living with my parents still. I do not feel proud telling you that I'm a 28-year-old girl who's never been in a long-term relationship. These things don't feel good. And maybe if I'm a girl who's 28 and has never been in a relationship, in order to compensate for that, I throw myself into my work and I throw myself into school and I get a great degree and I start making lots of money and I move out on my own so I can make up for it on the other end. And maybe every time the topic of, Sarah, when are you going to settle down? I start talking to you about paying my bills, and I start talking to you about how independent I am and how happy I am to live on my own. And I start talking about the thing that I'm really, really good at. If I'm really overweight and we're at a party and we start talking about weight and whatnot, it is not uncommon for me to change the scenario or the conversation to something I am good at. Whether it be video games, whether it be chess, music, playing an instrument. So it's very natural for someone to want to compensate at something that they're bad at. Why? Because it feels uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. You're not proud of something when you're insecure about it, especially if it's not yourself, especially if it's a part of your identity. So the question becomes, what do? Do you shine light away from who you are, or do you begin to fundamentally change who you are as a person? Changing who you are is extremely hard. And what I found, anecdotally speaking, anecdotal is just a fancy word for in my own stories, from my own life experience, is that individuals rather flip the script. So not only do they say, look, if I'm insecure about my finances, every time I go out to a party, I'm going to make an effort to dress my nicest and to constantly talk about how much money I'm making, which I'm not actually making. Because I feel like I have to overdo it in order to gain that respect. And the interesting thing is, other people might not care about your insecurity as much as you do. Like, you might be really insecure about your finances, about the fact that you don't have a car, about the fact that you look a certain way, a certain acne, whatever it may be. You might be making it a bigger deal than it actually is. So what we recognize is with these different sort of insecurities or ways that we look at life is sometimes the individual actually makes them worse than they actually are. And what they recognize is, in order to lessen that feeling of discomfort and lessen that feeling of shame, you're going to try to overcompensate. You're going to try to find something to excel in at something else. You know what? Sports have never been my thing, but I'm going to get so good at chess that I'm going to whoop everybody who sits across from me. Look, chess has never been my thing, but I'm going to play instruments so well because this is my thing. This is what I'm good at. And it's not even about being competitive. It's not about wanting to be better than other people. But it's recognizing that you have a deficit in a certain area, so you have to make up for it in a different place. Let me throw some martial arts lingo your way. If you watch MMA, there's a very clear, distinguished idea about styles. If I lack in this style, I better be really good in this style. If my stand-up is mediocre, my ground game better be exceptional, or vice versa. Why? Because I have to make up for it in some way. So the question of insecurities becomes this. If there is something in your life that you are insecure about, you sit back and you think about it and you go, why does this make me feel this way? What does being insecure about this mean to me? And then once you sit down with your thoughts and you think about why this affects you the way that it does, now you can start thinking, is this something that I want to start working towards? Is this something that I want to begin to change, that I want to better in some way, shape, or form? And if the answer is yes, great. And if the answer is no, maybe you can take a step back and go, look, the reason I'm insecure about this isn't because I really care about it, but it's because there are societal expectations that are telling me I should care about this. Like, the fact that I'm 25 and I live at home isn't a big deal to me, but the fact that I keep watching the news and on social media and they're telling me that I'm a loser if I haven't moved out, that's what makes me feel terrible. So then you really have to analyze those insecurities and go, do I want to change them? If so, am I changing it for me or am I changing it for society's expectations? What will relieve the discomfort and what is the correct thing to do? And that, my friends, is a decision that you have to make for yourselves. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode, folks. Take care of yourselves and stay safe. Bye-bye.